Hi everyone, it's Mystery Monday and I am Zara Altair, and for the past number of weeks we've been going through writing a mystery according to the 40 sentence story structure, and we're finally at the end. The Sleuth Triumphant, who confronts the killer at the end of your mystery. So in the beginning and the very first act, you laid out all your detective skills one by one as they came into different situations and revealed them throughout the second and third acts as having setbacks. Your sleuth just wasn't using those skills to their potential. So in the middle, all those skills exposed your sleuth's weaknesses. And now, in this final part of the fourth act, it's at an end. And you can bring back all those skills and strength as your detective confronts the killer. So, this is where your detective has learned from his mistakes in the middle. All the mistakes your detective has recouped and regrouped and has learned from all the ways he was missing things or misunderstanding what he heard or misinterpreting a clue. And now your detective knows how and why the killer attacked the victim. And in this final confrontation, the detective must do one last task: get that killer to confess. And your sleuth must make it clear that the killer is the one who committed the murder. So you get to pull out all the stops here. So finally, you reveal your protagonist's skills in a positive frame. And whether it's deductive reasoning or observation or just plain dogged determinism or a combination of skills to get your reader to see how all the frustrations and setbacks naturally led to this final revelation. So I hope that makes sense to you, because it's really important. Every single setback that you created up to the middle and past the middle, and even in the beginning of this very last act, every single setback is pointing your sleuth toward this final revelation. So you're about to write the end. Okay, it is very exciting. Writing a novel is a lot of work. So let's go through these last storyline sentences. So first, I'll be reading Bonnie's sentence, which is generic, and then we're going to talk about how this works specifically for mystery novels. So the war of attrition begins as the antagonist focuses fight harder, and your protagonist is isolated from allies and resources he was counting on. And the antagonist's minion or resource that was neutralized is brought back into play or replaced by something even more powerful. So if we look at that from the perspective of a mystery, your detective can't make contact with any of her allies and has to go after the killer alone. And the killer now seems to have an ironclad alibi or escapes an approach by your detective, and she's got to take this on by herself, and the killer is just beyond her grasp. So in plot structure, you're at the climax stage for the war of attrition. Okay, next sentence or chapter, if you're focusing each sentence on a chapter. Your protagonist steps forward to battle the antagonist mano a mano. The true extent of the antagonist's power and the depth of his evil become clear, and the antagonist gains the upper hand. And you can even have one last twist here if you like. So your detective finally finds the killer, but the killer has a surprise for the detective, and your detective may have made a false assumption or misread the killer's intent in this situation, and the killer pulls out one last trump card, one the detective didn't expect, and whether it's a battle of wits or hand-to-hand fighting, the killer plays that one last card. So here we are, almost at the end, and still the tension is building. So in plot structure, you're in the climax stage 5, mano a mano. So this is going to depend on the subgenre that you were writing. If it's a crime story, police procedural, cozy, you're going to approach this in a different way, but the underlying structure is exactly the same. Okay. So your protagonist realizes how he can strike the decisive blow and defeat the antagonist, and he does. And this is the last place in your story for a twist. All right, so let's narrow that down once again to a mystery. The detective looks the killer in the eye and gets the confession. In the battle of wits, he pulls out the piece of evidence that condemns the killer. In a physical fight, he wins. And you can twist this up by having the opponent inadvertently supply that one last piece, or any of the suspects. You can just twist it up again, and the killer may hem and haw, but finally admits to the crime. Ta-da! Okay, so in plot structure, you are there. Climax, stage 6, from the ashes of disaster. Okay, and then 39, your protagonist reacts to the defeat of the antagonist, who is or has been disposed of and out of commission, and allies might be recovered or revived. And this is one last time when you can bring in either subplot A, the opponent, or subplot B, the love interest. It just depends on how you want to construct your story. All right, so as we narrow it down to a mystery, in the aftermath of victory, your detective surrounds himself with supporters. The opponent gives up for the moment in the wake of the detective's victory, and the love interest may appear one last time, and any loose threads from anywhere in this story get tied up here. Okay, this is the place where you tie up all the loose ends so your reader isn't wondering, whatever happened to Fred? You know, if something was questionable about Fred, this is the place where the Fred issue gets resolved. So in plot structure, this is the resolution stage, the sweeping up, cleaning up everything, tying up all the loose knots. All right. And then the very, very last chapter, your protagonist and any surviving allies may celebrate their victory and console each other on their losses as they tie up all remaining loose ends, including a romance subplot, if there was one. So this is the place where the love interest comes back and they get together or they part, depending on how you're going to carry that subplot out. And your story ends with your protagonist reaffirming how he's changed and how he's remained the same as the result of this whole ordeal. And he can do this through both words and actions. And the detective celebrates either at a party or home alone, and the love interest may join him. And one last pithy thought on fighting crime from your detective. It's always fun to do, don't you, detective? One last word. Okay. So, and then a side note about mysteries. These last two sections, section 39 and section 40 in the resolution, mysteries often combine these two. So you can use your discretion, as always. So if you're tied to 40 chapters, you can add another chapter earlier with a complication, a twist, something much earlier in the story to shorten up the resolution phase, if you like. But the main point is you're done. And this is the resolution stage 2 connection in plot structure. So you just wrote the end. The end. You've done it. You've worked through your whole mystery. So all that planning and brainstorming paid off, and the conclusion reveals your sleuth as the hero your readers will love. And celebrate all the frustrations and setbacks you dreamed up, and revel in your creation of a sleuth worthy of your readers' attention from start to finish. Okay, one last word about writing the end. All right? This is hard to do, but now put your manuscript aside. Don't look at it, just put it aside. Don't open the file. Don't pull out the printout from a drawer. Just put it aside for at least a week. 2 is even better, but just don't look at it. Don't even peek. Work on your next story, take a vacation, give your family your full attention, whatever you want to do. But this story is percolating. You're going to let it simmer. So it's okay without looking. It's okay to write some notes about something you think maybe you want to amplify or change. And you will think of some while your story's hidden away. But don't look at the manuscript. Really give it a break. Because that way, when you enter the editing process, you'll do it with fresh eyes. So, congratulations. You finished your mystery. Okay, that's the end of going through the 40 sentences, and I hope that really helps you understand how the storyline is one continuous thread that runs throughout your mystery, and all the complications and problems that arise in the second and third acts are all pointed toward this confrontation and resolution at the end. And when you go back and edit, it is one of the things you want to check, that you haven't gone off on a sidetrack, but that every single complication, problem, frustration that you give your detective is actually eventually a step toward this conclusion. Okay. Congratulations. I'd love to hear from you if you use these 40 sentences in any way to work on your mystery. I'd love to hear how they work for you, because I think they're just fabulous. You don't get stuck in, am I at the inciting incident? Which one of these, is the pinch point too, and all that stuff. This just lets your story flow from beginning to end. I really love the 40 sentences. So I'd love to hear back from you, how they work for you, and if you had any problems with them and what those problems are, please let me know. So I only have one question today, but it's a really great question, and it also has to do with what we've been talking about today. Okay, I'm confused. I've heard about Aristotle's 3-act structure, but you talk about 4 acts. Why is that? You know, 3-act, 4-act, and all the other names of plot structure that are out there, they're all tools. So I want you to remember that they're guidelines and nothing is cast in stone. Um, you want to write a novel that makes sense to your readers, brings them in, keeps them interested with problems and confrontations and obstacles. Uh, but these are just guidelines. And especially for beginning writers, I think it helps to use something like the 40 sentences, which breaks things down into 4 acts, um, because it'll guide you along in every section of writing your story. But the 4-act structure really breaks down the second act into 2 parts. And the 2 parts revolve around the midpoint of your story. And that is when there is a big crisis for your detective. And at that point, your detective kind of changes direction and goes forward in a new path. So if we look at the 4-act structure, in Act 2, your detective is using his skills, learning more, finding more clues, finding more evidence, and even finding those red herrings, and discovering more about the victim's world. And at the midpoint, when there's this big crisis where things kind of fall apart and the detective realizes they've been headed in the wrong direction, in the 3rd act, you get to concentrate on displaying your detective's skills in a new way, helping them find a new path to discover the killer. And as we've mentioned in previous episodes, as it gets deeper and deeper into the victim's world, he starts to see the killer's world as well. So, and then that 3rd act leads to the 4th act, which we've been talking about last week and today, about bringing your story to a close and your detective actually knowing who is the killer and then confronting that killer and getting them to confess. Okay. So at the midpoint, you have that high drama scene, and it's kind of a pivot that can take your detective to new problems, new frustrations, new ways of seeing the victim's world and the killer's world in that 3rd act. So you're deepening the story. But you can think of it as all the 2nd act. So this, in the 4-act structure, the 2nd and the 3rd act comprise the traditional 3-act structure. It's just breaking it down a little more to help you focus on going step by step through your story. And of course, as always, any structure, including the 40-sentence storyline, is a guideline to help you navigate the waters of writing a novel. Okay, that was a really great question. And I hope that brought some clarification about the difference between 3 and 4-act structure and your freedom to do whatever you want. It's just that often beginning novelists get stuck, or they get sidetracked and start to go off on a tangent, so that we're not always headed toward the conclusion. All right. So that's it for today. I just had a couple of announcements. The new Argolicus Mystery, The Vellum Scribe, will be out next week, so I'll tell you more next Monday. I'm very excited about that, and I had great feedback from my advanced readers, and it's edited, and it'll be out next week. And then also the Roman Heir, the previous Argolicus mystery, will be out as an audiobook soon. I've identified the narrator and will be working on the audiobook creation, so that's very exciting. That'll be my first audiobook. So things are happening in my world. And then, as always, I want to invite you to join me every Monday on Mystery Monday. So be sure to subscribe, and be sure to, when you subscribe, that you hit that little bell for notifications, so you'll get a notification, and it will bring each session to your attention. All right, so thank you very much for being here. And as always, send me questions about your mystery writing, and I'll see you next week.